You know, the Congress and the courts have repeatedly directed and ruled that before government promulgates environmental regulations, they must take a hard look at the science basis for those rules. The administrative process for this is called the hard look doctrine. The science we call environmental criteria. There really is no science basis for the consent decree. USGS in 2004 prepared what they call protocols that gave management suggestions to the Park Service for setting up boundary areas using judgment of the Park Service in conjunction with other needs, with visitor needs, with enabling legislation. It's quite clear what that science, what those protocols are. It was never explained to the public. I'll talk to those protocols later, but it was never explained to the public how the scientists got from the body of information we call science to the actual closure distances. It was, however, pointed out within the protocols that those are judgments and those are opinions of people who happen to practice science. We'll talk later on about the preparation of science, but right now just understand it's never been presented in a clear manner that the public would understand and buy into. Now, there's two species that we protect along with others. One of them is the piping plover, and one of them is the American oyster catcher. One thing that's never come out in this whole discussion with regard to the plover that was listed under the Endangered Species Act as threatened about 1986 is that since 1986 the recovery goals for that species that were set 3 decades ago have been pretty much met. For the Atlantic coast piping plover population, in 1986 we had 790 nesting pairs. By 2007 we had 1,880. Those numbers have constantly gone in the right direction, showing the recovery of that particular species. Since then, however, environmental activist groups have targeted the Cape Hatteras National Seashore and have thus far been successful in designating great portions of that as critical habitat. There's currently litigation ongoing to determine whether or not that was done in a valid manner. But it's never been disclosed that the piping plover species is doing quite well without draconian measures, as we've seen in the consent decree in the last few years. The consent decree over the last couple of years has in no way produced a natural resource benefit over and above what the interim plan was well on its way to do. The fledge counts for example, the piping plover and the American oyster catcher were higher under the interim plan than they were under the recent years of consent decree. For example, 7 plovers fledged in 2008 and 6 fledged in 2009. There were no storms to speak of, and there clearly were no ORVs. 17 American oyster catchers fledged in 2008 and 13 fledged in 2009. As everybody can see, these numbers are going the wrong direction. Now, I can always speculate as a scientist, and I will do so. What I'm saying is not science, it's strictly speculation based upon a basic understanding of environmental science. When you open wide areas of free movement to predators, some species is going to lose out. And I think it's the birds right now. It appears the National Park Service continues to want to align itself with the activist organizations. The Deputy Director of the Park Service in testimony in 2008 said that he was quite satisfied with the progress the consent decree was making. I would suggest that political executives of the Park Service might want to re-examine their own data coming out in recent years. They might want to consider that position. So what can the public do about all this? Well, first thing, they need to recognize the very bad precedent of the consent decree and its implementation, and to do whatever they possibly can as citizens to ensure such denial of public involvement in decision-making not occur. They should also review the history of the seashore access issue. A good place is in the archives of Island Free Press. The editor of Island Free Press is a Pulitzer Prize-winning editor. Unfortunately, none of the other media have elected to review that factual information to the same extent they do press releases of the Southern Environmental Law Center. I encourage citizens to join and support those organizations working for public access of the National Seashore, especially those organizations that we find here several times every year with cleanup projects, public education projects of how to drive responsibly or how to access the Outer Banks responsibly. I also want to make a point that even people who like to come out and observe wildlife, many don't get access to what they think they're going to have access to. We're all losers in this consent decree. I encourage citizens to get involved. The worst thing in a democratic society and a democratic republic like ours is to become complacent. Figure out somebody else is going to do the job for us. Get involved, send emails, no matter what your position is. Support the process, provide factual information, but demand that you have a say in the business of government. Finally, I encourage everybody to thank Dare County, especially Dare County commissioners, for making this website, this type of information, available to the public. It's refreshing to me to see public administrators truly working on behalf of the public.